All right, guys, let's get into it. Let's get into it. We got a Apple Podcast review of the week, so I'll just dive right in. So this one is titled "No Fluff," and this one is from Great Podcast, is the guy's name who sent this one in. So thank you, Great Podcast. Appreciate it. So, no fluff. This podcast is for all dads looking to be engaged, empowered, and strengthen their journey in fatherhood. Christian dads need to be equipped to be the best dads, husbands they can be. And this podcast is where they can find it. Great job, Dan. Keep it up. So, thank you, Great Podcast. Appreciate the Apple Podcast review of the week. Pretty cool. So, this week, we're blessed to have a special guest with us. Every week we've got a special guest with us, but super excited to have Jay Millar with us this week. Jay has got a My Virtual Dad is the program that he has. He's a native of Colorado, so I love the mountains, and he's been happily married for 25 years. They've got three boys, 24, 22, and 20, and he adds in and one daughter-in-law. So like I think that is so cool to include your daughter-in-law as how you picture your personal family. So that's awesome. I know you do a lot of different things, but let's start off with kind of where you came from. How was your upbringing and everything? So guys get a feel for where you came from.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've been listening to your podcast for a while and just I agree with the review that you just shared. It's no fluff. It's, hey, we're some practical things that can help Christian dads along their journey, and we all need help, and we shouldn't be embarrassed to ask for help. But, I came from a background, so I'm a Colorado native, as you mentioned, and I grew up in a home with domestic violence and alcoholism. My parents divorced when I was age 10. And a pivotal moment. My mom remarried really quickly after that, and she married another guy that was younger. I can absolutely see why she got remarried. He had a really tender heart. He was sweet. He was the exact opposite of my mom, kind of from the emotional sense. But he was on his own journey as well, and he was more like a stepbrother or an uncle. He was 12 years younger than my mom, so he was a good guy, but didn't pour into my life, didn't offer any advice. And then when I was in my early 20s, and this is the days before YouTube, Dan.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
really glad I saw this clip. And actually, I don't think I've been able to find it out there on YouTube, but I've read it. Lou Holtz, who was then head football coach at the University of Notre Dame, said something that changed my life. He said, there's only three things that will change you from where you're at today to where you're going to be 5 years from now. And I internalized that to mean I can change my life, and not just 5 years, but my entire trajectory of life. And he said, it's the only three things that will change you are the books you read, the people you meet, and the dreams you dream. And he borrowed that from another motivational speaker, Charlie Tremendous Jones, back in the 60s. So, I mean, everybody borrows stuff from everybody else. But I heard that and I internalized that to mean, okay, here I am in my early 20s. I don't know how to do life. I loved, thanks to my mom and my grandmother, I loved God. And I knew I felt I was built special. I had this really tender relationship and desire for God. I knew I was special. I knew, God had a plan for my life, to prosper me and not to harm me, to give me hope in a future. Jeremiah 29:11. I've just loved that verse my entire life. But I was like, I have no idea. I don't know what a relationship looks like. I don't know how to run my money and my finances. I don't know how to be a good husband, father, provider. I don't know how to run a career. I was the first member of my family to go, above my direct family, to go through college. So I felt I was just, walking through a forest with a machete, trying to figure things out. And so I've had a heart of trying to learn and seeking mentors. Never had like one mentor that I sat down with, and I've had some friends that I've been friends with for 30 years who've been consistent, but I've created this tapestry of mentors, of people to speak into my life and to give me advice and guidance, and a lot of it's to say me too as well. Hey, I'm struggling too, Jay. You're not the only one. That's probably the biggest relief I've gotten from my mentorships is you are not alone, buddy. Welcome to the club. Because I was kind of ashamed that I didn't know how all this worked, and I kind of hid sometimes and became very passive. So I've created mentors and read books that have stood the test of time. There's so much great wisdom out there. I mean, the Bible being a number one, all that wisdom that's in there. And then people write books that kind of explain the Bible, like Dave Ramsey's baby style, his total money makeover, right? That's all biblically based. He's just helping interpret it, bring it to life, make it actionable. And so I've been drawn to books like that my entire life as well. So just created this virtual dad. That's why I call my program My Virtual Dad, because I think we all need to, even if you have a great father who speaks into your life, we all have friends, brothers, uncles, cousins, grandparents who speak into our life, and we all do build our own virtual dad, whether we're aware of it or not.
So you brought up something I'd like to go back to. Jeremiah 29:11. Like that one's a really, really powerful one. And a lot of guys, including myself, have battled issues with just worth and worthiness. So how can we move into 29:11 and feel like you felt, that belief that God wants to prosper us?
That's a great question, Dan. And I struggled with that. I'm 54 right now. I think I view my personality as a pie chart, and the world, 90% of the world, my neighbors, my family, my friends thought, hey, Jay is driven. He's going after it. He's capable. He's going to be able to create a successful life. But there was that 10% of me that said, I'm not worthy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
my dad thought drinking beer was more important than being with his son. I mean, that was the dialogue that went through my head. I've reframed that to say, I mean, my dad was ill. He had an illness. He wasn't of right mind. I never knew my best dad. I didn't.
Right.
But and I'm peaceful with it. I've forgiven him. He's passed 25 years ago. My father has. But when I went to this retreat, a men's retreat here in Colorado. It's called the Crucible Project. Probably and there's they host these retreats throughout the country. I think most of the country, at least in the Midwest and Texas and Illinois. And a lot of it is about worth. It's about wrestling with God. Jacob wrestling with God is kind of a metaphor that's used. And I think what really popped with me at that session, and I was 50 years old when this happened, so about 5 years ago. Every man has a wound. I had a dad that didn't show up, who I didn't think cared. I met so many other men who had a dad that was overwhelming in a sense that they could never live up to his expectations, just kind of had this pressure cooker kind of feel. I had the opposite. I had no pressure cooker. I had all the freedoms, and it felt I wanted boundaries, but I never got any boundaries. I never got any advice. But these other guys who they could never live up to their father's expectations. They were never good enough. They were never man enough. And that makes me really tender. That makes me really sad. There's others who, just so many stories, men who've been molested and they felt powerless because, they didn't stand up. I have a little bit of shame. I didn't stand up more for my mom. I let myself off the mat because I didn't really understand what was going on. I think I was too young. My brother, who was 4 years older, stepped in and intervened. The last night my father lived at our house, my brother stepped in, said, no more, we're drawing the line here. This is it. You're out. And he literally wrestled him to the ground until the police came and said, you're not going to do this to my mom anymore. Right. And my brother's my hero. He says, I say he saved my life. He says, I saved his life because I brought him to faith in a new way. So my brother's one of my heroes. And so what I learned at that retreat, after hearing everybody has a story and everybody felt that they were unworthy, it just popped in my head, Dan, like, gosh darn it, guys, come on. God loves us. He created us special. He knows how many hairs we have in our head. He created us unique. There's never going to be anybody like Dan Lewig's. There's never been anybody created before like you, and there will never be anybody created like you ever again in the history of the world. That's a powerful feeling. So we got to listen to God, our Father, instead of what we're hearing from society and from our families of we're not enough. I think men and women struggle with this as well. This is not universal to men.
Correct.
Or it is universal to men, but it also women have an ungodly standard or an unbelievable standard that they're held to in society as well. So we all battle with it and we all feel unworthy. So my thought was, let's all wake up. We can do this. God says that we're valuable. He made us valuable. Let's listen to that voice instead of the earthly voices.
Absolutely. So how I work through that, was just one, recognizing that it was a problem. Like this was a limiting belief and it was going to keep me where I was, and I was going to lack success, or at least the success I could have if I stepped into it. And where I started with it was, I'll say power statements. It sounds more manly than saying affirmations. So I wrote a power statement down that was very simple. It just says, I am worthy. And every morning I'd say, I am worthy. And I've said this on a number of podcasts because I truly believe it's very a critical step if you're stuck in that unworthy mindset, or you get into a new level of success and you feel like you don't deserve it or you shouldn't be there. And every day I'd start off with, I am worthy. And then a little while later, started off with, not only am I am worthy, but I am worthy of God's love. And then the next thing that came up that I didn't feel worthy of, just directly attacking it with, I am worthy. And then sometimes adding something to the backside of it because of this, that, or the other, or I do this, or Jeremiah 29:11, like whatever it was, but I'd have some evidence based to refute the lie that, now looking back, I'm like, yeah, Satan kind of plants those lies in our head, and he's, crafty and clever and finds one that works. And the worthiness issue is something I run into over and over and over again with people. One of the guys that was on the podcast before, he's a Hall of Fame volleyball player, and he's like, I won the national championship. Dad, am I good enough yet? Am I good enough yet? But dad wasn't at the game.
Yeah.
He's like, why the heck wasn't my dad here at this game? He was so frustrated. But so that pushes him to excel in many areas, but he's still seeking that validation from his dad. So that worthiness issue is a big, big thing.
Yeah, those stories, like the volleyball player, I know a few pro athletes, and they are driven in the same way. They love their dad, but there's something missing there. They're not getting that effort, that validation from them. And yeah, it's sad. And we all do seek that. We all have wounds from it. Like I said, I have wound from absence. Others have wound from, and that's the volleyball story, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned Charlie Tremendous Jones earlier. So his daughter was introduced to me, and Tracy introduced me to Nikita Koloff, the NWA Tag Team Wrestling Champion from back in the day, and he fought against Ric Flair and stuff. And he mentioned his father also had 25 years of absence from him. He was a total alcoholic. And when I asked him about that, he goes, "Man, I'm so blessed. I really dodged a bullet there." Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? He goes, "Well, I would have learned how to be an alcoholic if I'd have seen my dad pounding him down every night." Because I'm really glad that didn't happen. I didn't become an alcoholic. Like that's
There are times when, yeah, I'm removing a dad. My mom was in a toxic relationship, of course, with physical abuse. She had to get out of that relationship. It was very scary. It was in the 70s. She didn't have her name on the bank account back then, right? That was the way the world ran. She didn't have credit. She didn't have a job. She didn't have a career, and she had to get out of that. So it was a very scary financial situation for her, and to take care of us, three kids, and to protect us.
Yeah, we stumbled into worthiness. What's another topic where guys just struggle with, where they can use some help?
Well, I think there's three things that guys really struggle with, and it's worthiness, it's competence, and it's power. And again, as I've talked to men, and I've led men's groups for 25, 30 years. I've talked to a lot of men now that I'm rolling out my virtual dad and really seeking to help mentor men and be a part of the solution. I know there's many solutions to this problem, but those are the three things that men struggle with. And there's actually a deep psychological study that went on. It said, just like the macronutrients of protein, carbohydrates, and man, what's the third one? I'm drawing a blank. Protein, carbohydrates, and
Vitamins?
fat.
Fat.
Yeah, those are the three major macronutrients. Yeah, it's do you feel worthy? Do you feel competent? And do you feel powerful? And again, all of our core issues, I think, roll back to those three things. If somebody didn't show up in our life, if We felt if we were abandoned in some way, we don't feel worthy. That's one of the attributes, right? Competence, I think, is probably the biggest thing that men, we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to be embarrassed. And that is a big cause of challenge for us, because that makes it so that we don't reach out for help, right? And this is a joke that predates smartphones. From, did you hear about the guy that stopped and asked for directions while he was driving his car? The punchline is, it's a fictional book because it never happens, right? And that's a broad brush thing about men, but men really, and that's why we need to seek, kind of small groups, a trusted set of men that we can rely on, because we need to be able to go in and be vulnerable and say, look, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. You've had so many great topics on your podcast, right? Is it finances? Is it pornography? Is it is it some substances that are drawing you down a dark path? Is it a friend, or maybe some relationships that aren't serving you well, right? All of those things, but we want to be competent, and we're afraid to ask for help. And then the powerlessness. I mean, a lot of times, again, I mentioned the things that breaks my heart is like the molestation kind of stories. So many men don't know that their friends have gone through things like that. That's a powerless statement. Me not stepping up for my mom. Again, I've let myself off the mat with that when I was too young, and I really didn't understand what was going on. I know so many men who were in domestic violence situations, and to this day, they're just beat themselves up that they didn't step in and help and stop it sooner. So that's a powerlessness one. So those are the three.
So let's jump to power for a second. So
Sure.
we had a podcast a while back, quite a long time ago now. Money, Sex, and Power were the title of that one. Let's talk about the power side of this a little bit, and what are the issues there?
Like I said, I think I mentioned a couple of them. If you're in a situation, with a relationship where you're not building the boundaries, and you feel like you're being walked over, it can be with your own family. It could be with a job. Maybe a job is demanding so much of you, and you feel the fear of, hey, if I don't respond to this, I'm going to lose my job, and I'm not going to be able to provide for my family and things like that. That's a common power issue. You got to figure out how to build those boundaries and build a career that allows you to have some balance. Those are the main ones that I see. And there's codependency as well. I mean, I recently did another podcast with single moms, and one of the pieces of advice that they gave that really opened my eyes was, hey, single mom, don't have your son fill the need that a husband normally would, right? And that was really interesting to me, that a young boy, and I've seen some stories and some movies and some shows where, yeah, the boy feels there's this codependency in this relationship that's really unhealthy, and they are powerless. They feel powerless to stop it, because, hey, I want to take care of my mom. If I don't, I'm not a good dude, right? And so they feel like they're kind of forced down this path. And in the end, when they wake up, they understand it's just not right.
Yes. When I think power, I think about pride.
And like work, and like showing that you have what it takes, and being confident. Is that what you're talking about?
So yes, that sounds wonderful. And then the other version of pride, that boastful and so much pride that you're the greatest, and that power that comes with you get some power, and then you go to get more power, and you are constantly trying to work up that ladder just for self-satisfaction's sake, and feeling like you're the king or the conqueror, or those kind of things. And so when I hear power, that's one of my first thoughts is, I wonder if pride is coming after this, and if in a negative, bad way. And then they don't see what's coming. They don't see what's next, where guys can tend to roll over relationships and roll over people to get to the end means. And pride, so when I heard you say power, I immediately thought about the other aspect of it, of having power, however, wielding it in a very negative way.
Yeah. I think you bring a good point there. And I think it's totally egocentric right there. You have an ego that says, I am my own God. I, I'm not trying
Yes.
to be dramatic, but I've got it all figured out. I don't need help. I can do what I want. I can go navigate my career and grow my career and step on people and make success that way. But there's going to be some carnage along the way, right? But I don't care because I'm going to get what I want, right? And the world is littered with men like that. And I didn't bring that up because I think, well, those folks like that, I could talk to them all day and they would just say, great, I got it all figured out. I don't need to have a conversation with you, right?
So men, if you just heard that and you thought, I don't need to have a conversation with anybody, certainly not Jay, stop for a second. We may be talking to you. We may be talking to you right now. Certainly there's a lot more on the other side as well, but that pride thing is something that I see guys trip over all the time. Have you got any mechanisms or any thoughts of how to recognize it? So for that guy that's blind to what he's doing in that way, is there something they can do to help recognize, or have you seen other guys do something or have something in their lives that help them recognize that?
Really, the main tool that I've used talking to, I mean, in my own self-talk and talking to others, I had a group of men who was doing a pre-marriage quick start program last night, and it's just so much fun talking to, like, there's 10 guys that are about to get married, and just did this visual of, hey, when you're standing there during the ceremony and you're holding hands, and they say, the words come across, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, right? I said, if you are thinking that everything is going to be great and you're only going to have good times, and statistically, you're in a very happy spot. The years around, pre-marriage and the first year after marriage, they've done studies. Those are very happy times for both the husband and the wife, right? But you've got to understand, it's not a matter of if, there's going to be battles along the way, for work, for health, for finances, for your friends, everything. There's going to be good times and bad. You just got to be prepared for those things. So try to draw back and say, it's not all going to be great forever. And when that moment happens, don't feel ashamed. I find too many men who think, I'm not a good husband, father, provider because I'm having trouble in my marriage. And I think that's just ridiculous, Dan. I mean, we spend 4 years going to college to learn something, or we go to a vocational or trade school to learn a profession. We need to get certified, right? So many of us don't have guidance about how to be a good husband, father, provider. Why in the world would we think it should all be perfect without putting in some intentionality and some work to it, right? So I just try to reframe it and say, look, there's going to be bad times, and don't be ashamed when that happens. Raise your hand, talk to a buddy, talk to a friend, talk to your father, uncle, grandfather, whoever, and let them know that you're struggling with it. And that's usually what breaks down the ego barrier, because they don't have to feel like they're puffed up and they've got it all figured out.
Absolutely. So you mentioned not asking for directions. Guys, this is one where we should ask for directions. Two, we should have those guys in our life. We should have that wise counsel in our life. So if you think, hey, I got this issue going on, think about who the 5, 10 people that you can reach out to are. And you go, I don't have one. Well, go get one. Go get one.
You've got to cultivate a group of friends, your 2 a.m. friends, I call them, right?
Yeah.
Something bad happens, who are you going to call?
And wise counsel.
Yes.
So not just a friend, but wise. You might have your 2 a.m. friends, which will come get you, but they might not be the ones that help solve your problem.
I know a couple of groups of guys. They're 30 somethings, early 30s. They're still with their high school friends.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily bad. I went to grab a beer with 3 of my dear high school friends. We see each other a couple of times a year. We stay in contact. We text. We support and love one another. But this other group, they haven't matured at all. It's like they're sitting around partying every weekend. And I call them yes men, right? Oh, is that a good idea? Yeah. There's no challenging. There's no, hey, watch out, you're about to step in a bear trap. There's no wise counsel. It's like, yeah, let's just keep going. Let's just keep the party rolling. And they've been doing it for a decade, but they're in great danger right now.
You brought up the pre-marriage meetings that you do. So that led me to think I've got an interesting one, and I've got some homework for myself to do today. So this is timely. Picture yourself getting ready to say a prayer before the meal at the wedding. So 300 adults in a room. You've got the microphone. What are some things, or off the top of your head, what might be a prayer before the meal at a wedding?
Man, that's a great question. I actually got I had the blessing and the opportunity to do that for my son and his wife. He got married June of 20, and I'm getting getting emotional right now. My son and his my daughter-in-law asked me to do the ceremony, so I actually got to marry them, and then I asked my brother to say the blessing because I had so much going on. But what I would say is, hey, community. And any commitment you have to make in front of hundreds of other people, is a serious commitment. That's my joke, right? This is not for the faint of heart. You're making a big commitment here, but hey, here's a couple. Love on them. Guide them along their journey. They may come to you at different times with different needs. It's all part of the body of Christ. Help, be aware of this couple. Help this couple, and love on them. But you need to offer two things. You need to offer grace, because they're not going to have it perfect. And don't be judgmental. You might not like how they're raising their kids. They might not do it just like you did. They might not, run their finances. They might have different priorities than you. Have grace with them, but also speak truth into their life, because they need a community like this. And everybody in this room wants what's best for this couple. So be active. Don't walk out of here and think you'll never be a part of this again. You were invited here because you're special and you're part of their inner circle. And just be on guard and be ready to help this couple as they continue their journey throughout life.
Cool. Thank you. I certainly took some notes. So this would be the first time that I've been asked, and first time that I've said a prayer in front of a big group of people before the wedding meal. It's like really, really cool. So I'm so excited about it. When I got asked, I was practically in tears. Like, it was so cool.
Yeah. That's an honor. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
So my buddy says, no big deal. Just like when me and you go to lunch, like, you always say a prayer at lunch, like, just say that prayer, whatever that is. Like, don't make a big thing about it. I'm like, I wouldn't if you'd have just called on me and said, come on up and say the prayer.
I know you'll do a great job. You had that on your Facebook page. Who's going to say the blessing at a holiday meal at a house, right?
Yes.
And that's usually me. And I got a comment just recently of, Jay, that sounded like you were just having a conversation with God.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah,
I was.
Those are the best ones.
Yes. Yes.
I joke. In my 20s, I used to pray King James version, right? I, Jay, art thou thankful for thy blessings, right? It took me a long time just to have a conversation with God. I wanted to be like formal. And one day, it's the Abba Father kind of story, like,
yeah,
Daddy, Daddy, I just love you. And thanks for loving me, right? And I heard a sermon probably around 30 years old. And that really clicked for me, that I didn't need to go to the throne with all my ducks in a row and the perfect syntax on all my words.
Can you expand on that just a bit? Because I think that's one where guys get hung up also with the Abba Father. Like, what does that mean to you when you hear Abba Father, or just Abba?
Well, kind of like I said with worthiness, it's the same concept of God just loves us and he made us special. And think about if you are, and I know this is the journey of a Christian dad, there might be some people who don't have children yet, but when you have a child, and when they run into your arms, not many of us are commuting anymore. I used to get home and the kids would run out and say, "Dad," and just be so excited to see me after coming home or coming home from a trip. That's just the joy and the feeling I get in my heart when I pray, when I read the Bible. Like, uh, you know, I don't listen to the earthly things, but God wants me to have joy, and He wants me to have love with our relationship that we have with each other. And I told you I learned that in prayer, but I also learned it in journaling, probably a decade after I learned it in prayer, because I used to try to journal in kind of a formal thing, like I was performing for somebody, and I'm like, what the heck am I doing? And I read this book, Julia Cameron. She's this teacher in, I think, New York. She teaches writing classes, and she calls it morning pages. And her technique of morning pages is just like vomit out whatever's in your head, just to get it out. And it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to read it. Only you. And it's just to get all these things knocking around your head out of your head so that you can be more productive in life and not just keep spinning on the same idea where you're probably beating yourself up over something. So prayer and journaling for me are just things that I find relief and joy in now because, hey, God, I know you want what's best for me. I'm super sorry. I'm grateful you've given me everything that I love, everything that I adore, everything that I could never go to a store and buy. My body, my talents, my health, my didn't create my wife. She's a gift from God to me. My children, you could joke that I was participative in creating my children, but that's a miracle. The talents where I was born, my friends, everything that I really adore, I can't buy. And it was a gift from God. That's why I'm a faithful man, because I have to thank somebody for these wonderful gifts that I've been given. And I start there and then I say, I'm really sorry. I'm a blind fool. I have blind spots. I don't know where I'm making mistakes. God help illuminate my heart. God, teach me where I'm making mistakes. Help me to find the right relationships, the right words, the right job. Everything in my life, I turn over to you, and then I go from there. So that's a lot how I journal, and it's a lot how I pray.
Do you have a set time for that?
Right now, it ebbs and it flows. Right now, I get up and I read a chapter. I'm going through. I just finished John, and I'm almost through Acts now, and I'll go on to Romans after that. I just try to read a chapter just to get some good nutrition. So I get up, I sit down and I read just a chapter. It takes like 5 minutes, and then I say that prayer first thing in the day, and that really gets me in the right mindset. I'm not perfect at it, Dan. I mean, there's times where I've had to get up early and, we used to travel a lot, and I'd be doing that in the car on the way to the airport, right? Or on the airplane itself, things like that. So I like doing it first thing in the morning. I feel best when I do that.
Yes, 100%. So consistency. We've got a lot of control over our mornings. Some mornings we're on the red eye flight at 4 a.m. and less control of consistency. However, grab it on the flight or something else. So the days where uh, it doesn't fit at exactly the time that you normally do it, no big deal. Give yourself some grace. But I know some guys that have beat themselves up over, I broke my string of 140 days. Who cares? Start a new streak. So glad you
Exactly.
brought that up. We haven't talked confidence or competence, whichever way you want to look at that. Any tips on gaining that?
Gaining more confidence in life.
Yes.
I mean, that's really why I've put together some of the content that I have and the work that I have, is because I think men want to feel more confident just about being a husband, father, provider. So I'm not talking about competence at work. You can do training, you can find mentors with your work, and you can grow your career that way. I'm talking about competence at home. And I think there's some fundamental things in the pre-marriage class. We talk about the 4 things that are most likely to derail or cause friction in a marriage. And the 4 things are finances. It's the biggest marital friction point. finances. There's a family. Do you want a family? When do you want a family? How big do you want your family? Are you going to go through adoption or, things like that? The next thing is kind of building boundaries with the in-laws. This is kind of the leave and the cleave. We are, we're submitting to each other right now. We're not submitting to our parents anymore. We're submitting to each other and creating this life together. And there's a lot of boundary issues there. That's the third one. And the last one is faith, right? Do you agree what your faith is and how important it is and what priority it is in your life? That's a big thing. So those are the things we talk about. And what it's just a small example of growing confidence with these men because they're walking into marriage. I remember after I proposed to my wife, and actually I hiccuped. I had the world's worst proposal, first of all. And she saw, when you kind of blink or pause during a proposal, it doesn't make your future spouse feel good. And
Right.
I wounded her, Dan. And here's how I wounded her, because I said, hey, I want to get married, right? And I kind of paused like that, right? It's not like I want to get married, right? And we've worked through it. We laugh about it now. It's part of our story. So we've turned that negative into a positive. But at that moment, I'm thinking, again, I don't know what a good relationship looks like. I don't know how to build a career. I don't know how to run finances. I was $14,000 in debt the day I proposed to her. I was like, you're a great gal. You're the woman for me. You're the one that God God brought us together. I don't want to screw this up.
Yes.
And I was so concerned about me. So in this pre-marriage class, just talking about those four things, you just try to raise the confidence level and the competence level of saying, hey, I know if we have a conversation about finance, if we understand who we are, if we get on the same game plan, and I'm not creating any new content, just like Lou Holtz didn't. He borrowed from Charlie Tremendous Jones. I've got a few resources. Dave Ramsey is one of them. Ramit Sethi is another one. They've got great systems and programs where they can create. The thing I love about Dave Ramsey is he talks a lot about the emotional side. There's a nerd and a free spirit, right?
Yes.
I think that's one of the best marital conversations. My wife is the nerd, I'm the free spirit, but we're both directionally the same. We know we want to save, we know we want to tithe, we know we want to do all of these things. I just don't need to know the penny, down to the penny on the spreadsheet. I don't care. I know we're directionally going the right way, but my wife loves to make sure that everything is accounted for, and we're a great team in that way. But there can be a lot of friction if you're thinking, man, I want to balance the checkbook down to the penny and my spouse doesn't. People can get frustrated with that.
Yes.
And you don't need to, probably.
Right. Yeah. Neither one of us do.
So
some people do.
Example.
Some people have that innate, like your wife, absolute need. Like it's a baked into her, and that's okay.
That is okay. It's wonderful. I'm glad she does it. I used to get stressed out about it.
So you mentioned that your wife is a gift. You view your wife as a gift from God.
Absolutely.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds like a Hallmark card. Have you ever had a spot in your marriage where you didn't feel that way?
I can honestly say no. I mean, we've had challenges. We've had health challenges. We've had financial challenges trying to make the ends meet. Over the years, we've had relationships. We went to counseling 3 months after we got married, and it all went back to the worthiness thing. She was working. She had a big event. She used to be plan these massive events for the company that she worked for, and she got married. This event happened to be in Hawaii. It was a 2-week-long event. Guests, planning guests' arrivals and activities and dinners and all this stuff. She was in charge of all of that. Tremendous amount of and she was part of a team, but she was a leader of this team. And I was going to come out the last few days, and then we were going to spend, like a week in Hawaii together. Dan, I'm embarrassed to say it was a terrible week because she was still in work mode. And I didn't know it. I couldn't put the words to it at that time, but it triggered me and I felt unworthy.
Yeah.
Just like I felt with my dad. And it took me about 20 years to be able to articulate that. We thought it was a boundary issue with me kind of leaving my family and listening to, some input from others in my family and things like that. That's what we thought the core issue was. But yeah, I joke, we went to marriage counseling three months after we got married, because I was just sulking, and I went and I kind of hid and I became passive, and I'm like, I'm not worthy. And I didn't handle things right, and I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to articulate that.
How did you transition from not going to wedding counseling to going to actually going? Like, who scheduled the appointment? How did you flip the switch? And how did both of you say, yeah, we'll go?
Well, we'd done some good pre-marriage work. We'd taken some classes, and we through the church where we got married, and so we had weeks and weeks of conversations of going through different topics. Facilitators helping us through. I'd done some counseling in the past, and based on my past. I learned about adult children of alcoholics, and I figured out I wasn't alone in my journey there, and a lot of families face this, and some tools and techniques about how to deal with that. So I was comfortable, and I'd gone through counseling before. I viewed that as a tool in the toolbox. Not everybody does. There's a lot of people who think, man, if I got to go to see somebody, a counselor, I'm weak. I'm not capable. It goes back to that incompetence thing. And I would say, hey, we go to the gym to work on being fit. We get classes on how to run Excel, or I'm trying to make up examples here. Why wouldn't we think we need to go and talk to somebody and help, again, get the right vocabulary for the words that are going through our mind, instead of beating ourselves up all the time? So I was comfortable with it, and I set it up, and my wife and I went and sat down, and went. I think it was a month of having some discussions, and we worked through it, and continued on our way.
That's great. That's such an easy one to grasp. Your wife's in the mindset of working and plugging away, and frustration and busyness and everything else. And you're like, it's Hawaii. I'm with my wife, vacation. I could see how there could be some resentment and different mindsets that you're in.
The worst part, Dan, was on the flight out there. I was like, she's still got a few more days to cross the finish line here. I want to respect her work. This is her career. I want to be a supportive guy. And then I get there and I just failed. I gave myself the pep talk, like, I'm going to be a good husband. I'm going to be a supportive husband. Because guess what? It kind of goes the other way. If the guy's working, he wants to support it. I've only been successful in my career because my wife has been supportive of me, right? As I'm traveling and she's watching the kids and running them to activities and things like that, right? She supported me. I could not be more grateful. I am only a success because she has helped me, and she is the woman that she is, and she's, we've been a good team. So
Yeah.
I just completely failed when the shoe was on the other foot. I really did.
Yeah. And I love the analogy. We go to the gym so we get stronger. Why not talk to somebody so we can get stronger in our marriage also? Like, it's so simple, but yet we'll trip over ourselves time and time again, not asking for help or not admitting that we've got something going on, competence issue, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think level one is talk to your buddies about it. That's why you want to build, that group of 5 or 10 that you can really trust. Say, hey, I'm struggling with this. That's kind of level one, right? And you might just feel relief that other guys are going through similar issues, and they might have some lessons that they've learned that they can share with you. I think the counseling is like a level 2 or a level 3. Like, hey, this is deeper. I need a pro. I need somebody who can help facilitate, not just somebody who's going to provide medications. Please don't. My recommendation: don't go to those folks if they're just prescribing something immediately. Try to have a few conversations. I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but that should not be first response.
So let's pivot a little bit. You've had a couple like experiences within your own family with near death and possible death scenarios. A while back, I released a podcast about my brother, and he almost died from COVID. You almost died of COVID this year.
Yeah. A few months ago, I was hospitalized. I got sick. I got tested for COVID. It came back negative the first week, and then the next week it kept getting worse. I got shortness of breath. So it was in early August of this year, and then I couldn't breathe. So went to the ER, and they admitted me, and I continued to deteriorate. Was in ICU for 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Had a lot of oxygen pumped through my lungs and through my body, trying to help make sure I was safe. And the thing that makes me most tender is my wife had to call my 3 boys and say, we had the ventilator conversation. I was within a breath, literally, of going on a ventilator, which A, I didn't want, B, made me really angry. But yeah, my wife had to call my 3 boys and say, hey, this might be something that's going to happen, and let's all make sure we agree on it.
Were you able to think during this time? I mean that in a completely sincere way.
I had moments where I was very lucid on certain topics, and I had moments where I was a little bit cloudy. I had my wife and some friends advocating for me. We wanted to get some antibody treatments, some vitamin therapy treatments, try to help boost the immune system, help my body do what it's capable of doing. They were advocating for that. We weren't as successful as we wanted to be on that. We thought there's no harm. We thought it was a good idea. I think there was an antibody shortage at the time. So I wasn't able to advocate because I really didn't understand a lot of the medications that were going on and things like that. Where I was lucid, Dan, I was thinking a lot about my family. And I won't say I was peaceful. I was peaceful for a lot of things. I was peaceful that we'd built a kind of a stormproof life. I mean, we had all the legal documents of, what is it called? My wife knew what my desires were. We had the medical power of attorney. We had the wills done, the trust done. We had all of that done. We've just had a process that every time I have a birth day and my birth age is a 5 or a 0, we try to review the documents and update them and keep them fresh. So like for every 5 years. And so I felt my family was in good hands if something were to happen to me. Emotionally, I'm very close with my family. I tell them I love them a lot. I was peaceful with that. I was peaceful with God. I'm peaceful with heaven. I did write a letter to them while I was there, and I said my goodbyes. I said, hey, this is what I want you to know. I think they know it, but I wanted to put it in writing for them. So I did that. And at the end of the day, I remember distinctly writing, because I do worry a lot about money. It's just something I had a lot of. We lived paycheck to paycheck when I was younger, so I've worked on my relationship with money a lot, and we're fine. I'm blessed to be okay to be able to provide for my family and build a future. But I said it's not about the money; it's all about family and friends, and that's what I kept writing every day. That's all that matters is my family and my relationship with God.
Well, can you share some of the things you wrote in the letter to your kids?
Well, I said, I kind of started off like, hey, I know, many dads would say, you're the best kids, you're the best wife, right? And that felt generic to me. So I said, a lot of dads would say that about their spouse and about their kids. But I said, I pressed into that and I said, this is and I learned this at a retreat. I didn't use these words. This is the gold I see in you. This is the treasure. This is the value that I see in you. And I wrote to each of them what value it was, specifically, either whether it's their tender heart and their care for others, whether it was their work ethic, whether it was their faith. We all got baptized on the same. I got baptized as a baby in a Catholic church, but about 5 years ago, I made the decision to get baptized as an adult. I wanted to make the conscious choice on my own. And I just told the boys, I said, hey, I'm going to get baptized. I'd like you to be there. I want to celebrate with you. And I'm getting emotional again. I go up to get in line and they just all line up right behind me. And so we all got baptized the same day. So they all have a heart of faith that they're working on. Are they perfect? No. I mean, they're in their early 20s. Their frontal lobe is not going to fully form until they're 25, right?
Right.
So when I was in college, priorities. I loved God, but my priorities were school, beer, and watching college football. Depending on those depended on whatever day it was. They would shift, right? But they've got a heart for God. They're on a path, and so I just tried to point out what I specifically loved and appreciated about each of them, and that they were going to be okay because Father God's he's ahead of all of this, right? If now's my time to go, I feel I've given you the best I can give, and so I had some peace with that. Was I perfect? Absolutely not, but I've given the best that I could as a human, as a fallible human.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a guy that comes on the podcast from time to time, Blake Brewer, and he's got a legacy letter. So when I hear you say that, I'm like, there you are at the intense moment of not knowing if you've got another day in you, and you're writing legacy letters to your kids.
Yeah, I wrote that, and I write. My youngest just turned 21, and I write them letters during transitional moments of their life, like going to college, getting out of college, turning 21. I getting married. I try to write them letters saying, "Hey, here's what the world looks like from my view of as your dad." I try to offer encouragement. I try to offer just exactly what I said: grace and truth. Hey, you're doing great. You've made some mistakes, but you're loved, you're supported, and try to give them some pointers and things that I almost named my program "Stuff I Wish My Dad Had Said" when I was young, instead of "My Virtual Dad." And sometimes I don't use the word stuff. I use the other S word. So I just try to have the heart of, okay, you're 24, you've been married for a year. What does the world look like from your shoes? And I try to meet them where they're at. So the first one I ever wrote was 10 years old. I wrote them a blessing, based on, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and, the blessings of the father and how important that is. Took them through a little, we called it a Christian bar mitzvah. It was called The Squire and the Scroll. And it was this story that's kind of a coming of age thing for boys, warning them about pornography and drugs and alcohol and things like that. And the culmination of that was to do this ceremony. We got a Braveheart sword. It was awesome. It was fun. And publicly in front of family and friends and grandparents, we say a blessing over the boy, and how important they are is one of the most gratifying things in my life. And I feel grateful. I just stumbled into it. A buddy of mine said, "Hey, I heard about this. Let's do it." And so we got a group of like eight guys and 8 dads and their boys, and went through, it's like a 10-week thing. We'd meet together for an hour a week and learn a lesson and memorize some Bible verses and have some fun.
That's awesome. That gives me chills. Like, that is the coolest thing. I love that. Love that. Love that. So you also had the experience of your son almost dying.
Yeah. So my middle son, Adam, he was 18 years old. He's I say a high level hockey player. His goal was to play collegiate hockey. He was playing high level, getting ready to try out for a junior team. This was in the spring of one year. And for those who are in the sport of hockey, we're a first generation hockey family. All 3 of my boys played hockey. And he thought all the boys got sick throughout the year. They would just cough and have this nagging cough and sniffle, and just being around the locker room, and in the winter they all got colds, and it was kind of persistent throughout the hockey season. So he thought he was just having a cold, but he kept getting worse. He would skate and he would vomit after every skate. He would work out because they do a lot of lifting and strength training throughout the season as well. He couldn't do what he thought he could do. He went down and tried out or he was working with a team down in Louisiana and was asked to run, a mile. And so he goes from altitude in Colorado down to sea level, and he couldn't run. And then this is what makes me sad. It's that powerful thing. It's that incompetence thing. He didn't want to look weak in front of this new team. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell me and my wife that he was having this deep of struggles. He would say, yeah, I don't feel good, but he didn't tell us the extent of it. And trying to be a manly man almost killed him, because we thought he had pneumonia. We took him to urgent care. They did a quick EKG and called 911 immediately. He went to the hospital. They tried to go in and kind of do the defibrillator, but more invasive. They went up through the groin and tried to restart his heart. It didn't really restart, Dan. And so his organs started shutting down. His skin color started changing. And that's when they said, hey, we got to get him to another hospital. And that's where we loaded him, put him on the stretcher, took him out, loaded him on Flight for Life. I just remember looking through the window at him thinking, I might never see him again. Oh. And that is a pure God moment, because they flew him to the one doctor in the state of Colorado who knew some technology. It's called an Impella device built by this company called Abiomed. It's essentially a propeller that goes into the heart and helps circulate the blood through your body. It's kind of like a spotter in the gym, right? You can't lift all the weight yourself. Your heart can't pump all the blood it wants to. So this goes in and really helps circulate the blood. So he was the one doctor in Colorado who used this technology. My son was the first one to ever get the Impella in both his right and left side of his heart. That had never been done before. This doctor had been on paternity leave. I'm sorry. He had his first child and was out for like 2.5 weeks. That was his first day back.
Oh.
Like 3 hours after he flew in Flight for Life, we had unbelievable windstorms and they wouldn't have let helicopters fly. There's just all of these God moments that came into that. We had a team of, all these friends, all this community that I had become part of over the past 20 years. Those are the 2 a.m. friends, Dan. Called them all. They were all praying. They were all prayer warriors. We had people flooding to the hospital and just praying over my son. And, I just, it could have so easily turned the other way. I actually wrote, he was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. He was in ICU, came through it. He's fine now. He's going to college in the Northeast at Northeastern University in Boston. And now his passion, he wants to give back to the community that helped save his life. So he's got a life purpose now to give back to this community. But when he was in the hospital and we didn't know how it was going to turn out, I wrote his eulogy in my head. I couldn't bring myself to put it on paper, because then I thought it would come true. But the punchline was, if people would say, aren't you mad at God? He took your son when he was 18. And the conclusion is no. I would give anything for another day. How can I complain about 18 years with the son that I love? And I would just thank God for the 18 years. But I couldn't be mad. I could be sad. I could be disappointed. But I couldn't be mad. I couldn't be angry with God. Even though God said it would be okay. God would invite me to be mad at him. I just couldn't do it.
Wow. That would be an incredible position to be in. Sounds like a key thing was having that belief and faith in God, loving God. Sounds like your community that you've built around you over the years was a big part of your strength.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The people that came in, and when they could get in to see him, they'd put their hands on him and they'd pray over him. And so many people do that. I had prayer chains going, reaching out with people all over the world praying for him. I just hesitate. I know there's families where it hasn't worked out, and that's where my heart gets really, really tender, Dan. And that's why I think I was preparing for the worst, because I know I couldn't be mad just because God says he loves us. Our life is but a mist on this earth. We are but a speck of time over millions of years, right? Who knows when our time is to go? Who knows when our purpose is complete? And yeah, I mean, that'd be my encouragement to guys listening to this, is have those friends that again do know you, do love you, want what's best for you. And that community was just so unbelievably supportive during that time. We couldn't, and it wasn't about food and casseroles and things like that. It was literally the prayer and the daily encouragement that they were sending to us.
How are you said sending to you. How were they sending it to you?
A lot of it was just through the modern technology of texts and stories we heard. There's a couple of videos of this little, like these 5-year-old hockey players that Adam had helped coach, and they made this video just doing this little cheer for Adam on the ice. One kid wrote a letter, colored a picture, and stuck a hockey puck in an envelope, which cracked me up. I mean, it wasn't delivered through the mail; somebody handed it to us. But just really touching and tender that he stuffed a hockey puck in an envelope. We had people write down all these healing verses on a piece of paper, and they would come and bring them by. Something just so my wife and I, Deb, could read them. Again, a lot of text, phone calls. I did a caring bridge thing, and I had so much interaction on that of writing stories, giving updates, and people would comment on that and give encouragement through that mechanism as well. So a lot of different avenues, and we had people camped out in the hospital all day, every day for like 2 weeks. And we just set up a table and had food. It was like a big potluck.
Yeah, when people have trouble and it gets out there a little bit, sometimes I've heard people are hesitant to reach out, hesitant to send a text, hesitant to call, hesitant to show up. And it sounds like all of those different ways you welcomed and it helped you.
We're not alone. Like I said, everybody's going to go through struggles like this at some point in time, right? Maybe not exactly the same flavor, but I do understand what you're saying, and my encouragement to others is reach out. What's the downside? It's like taking a vitamin. There's not a lot of downside to that, right?
Right.
Reach out, and you're going to get so much encouragement and support because people love you and people care for you.
Hmm. Wow, that's such a powerful story. Thank you for going there and going all the way to where you're emotional and revisiting that. I know that wasn't maybe the easiest thing to do.
I won't say I told myself I wouldn't cry. Every time I think I get emotional every time I think about it.
I can understand why. Yeah, I can understand why. So yeah, we go through tough times, we go through things, and it helps. The tough times are where we grow.
Absolutely. Um, uh, the tough, would I change some of the tough times? Probably not, is the conclusion I usually come to,
Yeah.
because I know, I think that's a tool God uses in different ways. He wants to make us uncomfortable. Otherwise, we would just stay. We'd be stagnant.
Hmm.
I believe that. So I've tried to welcome challenge, because without it, I'm not going to move,
Right.
because I'm human.
Right. Well, fantastic. Let's get this episode closed out. Have you got any additional thoughts that you want to share with the guys? And then, as you know, since you're a listener of the podcast, we always finish out with a challenge for guys to go week to week, something they can accomplish. So, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom?
Um, uh, Words of wisdom. I'll do the challenge right now. I mean, I think what I would encourage men to do, if you're married, do it with your spouse. If not, find a good friend. Sit down and ask them to tell you 3 things that they appreciate about you. And that's going to be hard to hear, because we all like to deflect and kind of say, "Oh, yeah, that's just something I do," or whatever. But really genuinely receive that. Work on receiving that. And the next question is, ask, because you care about me, what are 3 things you would change if you could? Not 3 things you don't. You gotta word that very carefully, right? Not 3 things that you don't like about me, but because you love me, what are 3 things that you would change about me if you could? So what I do is, I've done this with my wife. I've done it with my boys. I did it a couple of years ago. I need to do it again. I'm going to accept my own challenge and do it here before the end of the year. And I think that's going to open your eyes to some things. It'll fill you up, because you're going to see what they truly do appreciate about you. And second, it's going to give you a little bit of homework, right? When I did it first time with my wife and boys, they told me I was angry. And Dan, that was an eye opener. I wasn't angry growing up like I did. I would never be physically harmful to anybody. But my anger came out, I call it exasperation, like, I don't know, ran out of propane on the gas grill, right? Trying to make dinner, something silly like that. I would just get too exasperated too often. And I just needed to take a breath and just relax a little bit. I was going through a career transition at the time. My kids and my wife were graceful with me. They thought it was just work stress, but there was more to it than that. And this is about the time I went to that retreat when I was about age 50. So all of this culminated together, and it really opened my eyes. And since then, my wife has said, "You are so much more relaxed. You're so much more emotionally available." And it's been a blessing, just that little exercise. So I took each of them out to breakfast and asked them individually what those. You always got to bribe with food,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something. But that's the challenge I'd give to men.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And then add on top of that the one-on-one time with each individual family member. Like, that's
Yep.
great.
Yep. Yep.
What an awesome challenge. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate you coming on. And I know guys are going to be interested in My Virtual Dad. How can they reach out to you?
Dan, I'm going to give you a link that you can put in your notes just for the Journey of a Christian Dad listeners. Access to a couple of free resources, learn a little bit more about me and the programs. So there will be a link there. You can reach out, or you can look at myvirtualdad.net is the website. And you can send me an email directly. It's Jay at myvirtualdad.net.
Fantastic. And I look forward to getting the links to the free resources as well. And I'll drop those in the show notes.
You bet.
All right. Thank you so much, Jay. I appreciate it a bunch. And thank you guys for listening. Thanks you for the Apple Podcast reviews. And then also thanks for sharing with your buddies to help them also become the best dads, husbands, fathers, Christians that they can be. So thank you again. Appreciate all of you. Appreciate you too, Jay. Have a great day.